A few months ago, I did an interview with Luke Smith. It was his return interview, and people were very happy to see that Luke is alive. And not only is he alive, but he is alive in Christ. Thank you, Luke, so much for coming on. People had lots of questions for you, and we're going to go over those questions. So thank you so much.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds great. And
Yeah.
it's good to hear from everyone again. Um, yeah, I don't know. We can go ahead and get into it, I
Yeah.
guess.
So the first question, one of the most impactful quotes I've ever heard from a random video of yours was where you said, yes, God has a plan, but you are in it. How have you personally lived that message?
Well, I wish I could perfectly live to that message. Because the fact is, like, we have opportunities literally every day to be more active participants in our salvation, but everything in life. And I found, I mean, actually, you even asking that question, it makes me seem like, oh, I barely do this at all. But that all of us have just been given so many opportunities to do so much. And to if you even seize 1% of them, I mean, you should seize 100% of those. But if you even seize a couple of those, you can make a massive difference. And so I think, I remember the video I said that in, and yeah, I think the real issue is never talk yourself into a corner where you are like, well, I have no say in my life. I'm just predestined to do this, that, or
Mhm.
the other. And that, guess what that's going to be? That's going to be the path of least resistance. That's easiest for you. You can make all these great excuses for doing nothing or doing whatever, you can do while lazy. So that's something obviously I still find myself in. So I need to rewatch that video because I need some of that medicine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean there are lots of I would just say part of growing up, part of being kind of who God created you to be. I mean, we are his icons in a way, and we're supposed to.
Yeah.
He created this universe, and we are in a way his agents on earth, right? And part of growing up and part of salvation, I think, salvation as a process, like
Hmm.
the kind of realizations you have in life is that, like, actually I don't need to be this depressed person who always feels like the world is just giving me a bad lot. I'm someone who can affect what's going on, and in fact I have a duty to do so. So I think when we grow up in the modern world, you go to public schooling, it's the same thing every day. You're put in this kind of box, and here's what you do to do this, that, or the other. In reality, the box is totally open. We have
Yeah.
so many possibilities in life, and we are kind of indoctrinated not into specific beliefs. I mean, we are indoctrinated into specific beliefs, but we're indoctrinated into kind of a mindset where you're very passive. You just want to do the easy thing, and all of us, including myself, we have to get out of that step by step, and be really who God created us to be.
Yeah. I think that's the beautiful thing about Orthodox theology is that it is synergistic, that we are working with the grace that God gives us and that we have free will, and that is essential to Christianity. And I really think that this anti-free will narrative is used to demoralize people. It's like, oh, everything is just predetermined. Everything is just a product of they'll say at one point that everything is random, but also your biology is determining everything about your life. But that's the
Yeah,
beautiful thing about Christianity is you do have agency over your life. If you're not happy with the trajectory that you're on, the best thing you can do is have goals and make practical steps of how you're going to get there. And
yeah,
you only truly lose when you give up on those goals, because you may achieve it. I mean, that's what we're kind of doing as Orthodox Christians our entire life. Is the goal is to be like Christ, to be like the Christ and the saints. But and we have to just focus on the day to day and steps that is gonna get us there, and we can apply that to all aspects of our life. But you're totally right
yeah,
that we're kind of socially conditioned to believe that there's this box, or it's like, if it's like a video game, that there's this very linear path that we can take. But really the options are endless. Like, you could do so many different things. It's just, are you taking the steps to actually do it, to
yeah,
actually make it a reality?
Yeah,
So
I remember the video that guy's quoting. It just came to me. There was a comment I got from kind of a Calvinist guy,
yeah.
and it was so good. It was so instructive because of how wrong it was. But what he said is, he said, "Listen, you probably have heard the metaphor that Martin Luther used, or to
Calvin.
talk about
Oh,
how. Well, no, Luther in this case.
Luther. Oh, okay.
So Luther had the metaphor of saying, well, man is like he's like a bridled ass. He's a donkey, and either God can ride him and tell him what to do, or the devil can,
Hmm.
right? And that kind of is this that is the kind of zeitgeist of monoenergism, like
Hmm.
this idea that Protestants have. But this guy in the comments, it was such a good comment because he said, listen, I can't force myself. I can't choose to love someone. I can't choose to feel this way. Like, I don't really have free will. God is just, either God lets you love someone or not. And that is not, I mean, the reason that is, it's such a good error for him to have. But I think the whole point is the way he looks at things, and the way, unfortunately, a lot of people look at, especially passions. In a
Hmm.
way, love in this context is a passion. Like, you might have feelings, nice feelings about certain people. And yeah, you can't necessarily force yourself to have good feelings about someone just out of the blue. But what you can do is you can act in love. Love is not just some emotion. A love is an action that interconnects all of us, and that emotion sometimes comes after acts of love.
Hmm.
And it's I think it's such a good example because the modern man, not just the Protestant world, but like kind of the modern way of looking at things, like defines people as if um they are just like these shells that passions move as if they're forces of the universe, as if gravity, it's just gravity that
Hmm.
draws us to do these things and we have no say in it. But the truth is, you actually do, like, even if everything inside of you, even if all of your passions, even if all of your emotions are telling you, I don't want to do this, you still can.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is important. It's a little thing where, I mean, I remember, I'm going to tell you the stupidest epiphany of my life. Okay. And maybe we're spending too much on this one question, but it's such a good one.
Yeah.
The stupidest epiphany of my life. I didn't do this the last time I talked to you,
I don't
right?
think so.
About lying in bed. Okay. This is the dumbest thing in the world. It's not even a good story. But there was one day, it was like a Saturday.
Hmm.
I woke up, I'm just in bed. I don't need to do anything. I don't have anything to do. Part of me's like, well, I could get up, I could do my prayers, I could go out, there's work I could do,
Hmm.
or I could just sit here and be lazy. And as I sit there, my the passions come to me. Oh, I just want to, oh, it's so nice and warm. Oh, it feels so comfortable. Oh, it's like in the scales of your brain, there's more and more and more and more reasons for me to just stay in bed and be lazy. But nonetheless, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna get up. I'm just gonna do my day. And that
Yeah.
it was a stupid epiphany for me because it's like I have every reason to do X, but I don't have to do X. I don't have to lay here. I can just,
Hmm.
it's almost like I have free will.
Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
and obviously that's a stupid and mundane example, but it's what happens to people. Why this is probably important for someone is that
Hmm.
people talk themselves into this mindset where it's just, well, I feel this way. I keep getting these kind of passions telling me this. So my brain, which just makes decisions by itself without my free will, it is just like a force of nature. Like, there's just
Hmm.
weight on the scales. I have to do this. And the truth is, you don't. Like, um, anyway, so.
Yeah, no, that's really well said. And I think this is a good segue into the next question that someone commented is how did you overcome lust, Luke? How did you overcome that? Because everything you just said, young men are just they're giving in to
Yeah.
the weight and taking the easier
Oh,
path. It's all around
sure.
us on Instagram, like all these TikTok, all these things that lead us into lust. So how can they overcome
Yeah.
lust?
Well, your question is very assumptive. No one, I have not overcome lust
Hmm.
entirely. But when it comes to specific things, we all know, things like pornography and things like that.
Hmm.
I did a video that everyone has probably seen who knows me, where I talk about, like, just some of the nitty gritty, how you separate yourselves from your I mean, the truth is, we fall into temptation or let's not even say fall into temptation. Again, we're always doing it. We're choosing to do it.
Yeah.
But the issue is people make it easy to fall into it. They have a daily routine. They have all these apps on their phone where, I'm scrolling down an Instagram and like every other account I follow is girls that, look like this, or, it
Hmm.
doesn't have to, we don't have to talk about sexual lust. It could be any kind of vices that we have. So I think really most people who are struggling with those things, the very first thing, and this is should be the easiest thing to do. It's the easiest decisions, the easiest like executive decision to force yourself into,
Hmm.
is just uninstalling those apps off the phone. You don't need any apps on your phone.
Yeah.
I guess calling tech. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Social media apps. I mean, you shouldn't have social media anyway, but like especially apps on your phone. If you don't want like an anchor of temptation in your pockets all the time, you just
Hmm.
don't want that. I mean, cell phones they really are like demonic in so many cases. Like they just make sin so easy. So
Yeah.
step number one is always making sure that sin is not easy. Like make sure
Yes.
you have to go out of your way to do any of this kind of stuff. Number two, I think accountability with others, obviously your priest, confession, but also other people in your life. And I mean, the thing to remember is people would not, I mean, again, to use like things like pornography or something that or like that as an example, you would not be tempted by that stuff if you were surrounded by your family and your friends all the time. Okay,
Yes.
that's just a fact.
Hmm.
Okay, it would not, you will not have those feelings, you will not fall into that kind of stuff if you have accountability. And the fact is, this is kind of a statement of the modern world. Again, we are people. We are already in living in pods. Okay, all
Hmm.
of us are. We make fun of people who say, "Ah, live in a pod,"
Yeah.
but we already are because we are
Hmm.
so separated from others.
Hmm.
And I think you really have to go. You kind of have to reorganize your life over making it more difficult for you to fall into these kind of things.
Yeah.
And other little recommendations that I would say to people, if you ever, let's say, move houses, okay? This is just something psychological about the human brain. When you are in a new environment, there's so many of your habits you can just totally redefine.
Hmm.
And I don't just mean moving. It could be getting a new computer, getting a new cell phone. Moving. Maybe your computer's on this side of your office, you move it to that side.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
sometimes little
That's
things
good.
like that, you can actually kind of hack your brain. You can
Uh-huh.
kind of hack your dopamine cycles. I've done that when I've struggled with, sometimes even things like lazy computer. Oh, I have nothing to do. I'll just pull up the computer.
Yeah.
I'll pretend to work, but I end up following down some internet rabbit hole, and I
Uh-huh.
get red pilled on something that doesn't matter. Who cares?
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to dismiss all of that, but
Hmm.
so I would say that kind of stuff. Like you just, and ultimately, remember that like well, this is going to sound weird, but God is watching, and I don't mean that in kind of a fascistic way,
Yeah.
but like
Hmm.
you, like we're all in this together. We all like kind of
Hmm.
noetically, we're all in this world. You are not really alone. You're only apparently alone, and little demons can whisper in your ear and make you fall into these habits. So I would just say, all of you, you are not going to just talk yourself necessarily. I mean, well, you could, that's a very saintly thing if you can talk yourself into that, but I
Hmm.
doubt you can. I think what you seriously need to do is physically change things about your life. Be in a
Yes.
different situation. Be in have it not easy for you to fall into those kind of vices. And again, this could we're kind of speaking about pornography, but obviously this applies to everything else, right?
Hmm.
So, and when once you're over that hump, and remember also, like once you're over the hump, or if you struggled a little bit, eventually you're gonna feel things are gonna get little easier all of a
Hmm.
sudden. Some people will say there's a hump. I'll after 2 months or so, you just won't feel it again.
Hmm.
You won't feel these kind of temptations. And that's not to say you shouldn't always be vigilant, right? I need to be vigilant, right? If I see something inappropriate, I want to make sure my eyes. I'm no saint, like, so
Hmm.
I don't want to even open up for that temptation. I don't want to give the devil a foothold.
Hmm.
So get in the habit of, if you see something that could lead you to sin, look the opposite way. Like you
Hmm.
have to do that. I mean, that's Christ is telling people to gouge out their eyes and chop off their hands to avoid sin. Like it's serious. So you can move around, you can move your computer, you can spend more time with people in real life, and you'll be less tempted for these kind of, autistic sins, that you commit by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what we so often forget is we should be asking God for help. We can ask the saints to pray for us
Exactly.
to overcome this.
Yeah.
And what really helped me was going to confession. It's like it
Yeah.
gets embarrassing when you you keep confessing
Confess
it
the same thing over and over
over
again.
and
Yeah.
over again, especially this. And I really like what you said about not making it easy. Is the harder you make it for yourself, like if it's on Instagram, you're seeing, or TikTok, you're seeing some, people dancing or something, and it leads you kind of down this rabbit hole. Like you don't need the apps, or just making it more difficult for you to kind of fall down this basically hole is how
Yeah.
is what happens. And because the biggest sin that's really new to the modern age is boredom. Is most of human history, people did not have all this extra time just to scroll and to seek dopamine. They were focusing on their survival. They didn't have as much energy to do these specific things. Like if
Yeah.
you're going and working out all day and you're at work or you're volunteering, you're at church, you're hanging out with friends, you're out doing things. When you get home, you're just gonna want to go to sleep. Is because that's where a lot
Yeah.
of the, I think for young men it happens is in the bed, you're on your phone. It's like those are the two factors, or wherever it's happening. And I think men are very physical. And so moving, like you said, moving your room around or doing a physical change is really going to make a big difference. And also, I also experienced that it does get easier over time. And the reason for that is neuroplasticity, is that it's kind of like walking on a path. And when you're going on like a hike or something, you see that the path doesn't have any grass growing on it. And that's how your brain kind of is when you keep doing this sin every day. Is it's really easy to relapse because there's less resistance on the path, versus every day that you don't walk on it, grass will grow back on the path. There's going to be more resistance to it. So once you get to like 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, it gets so much easier to resist it because you've gotten rid of the habit. So it's like understanding your brain, that about how we make habits that can be used for good things and bad things. Like if you make a habit to pray every day, it's going to be easier to pray. If you make it a habit to fall into this, you're bored, you're on your phone, you're in bed, you fall into the same sin. You need to make it more difficult for yourself, and there's lots of ways that you can do it. And
Yeah.
one realization that I had is, if I never wanted to do this again, I have the power to do it. It's like no one's forcing me to do this. It's just like if I was knew I was going to die if I did it again, I wouldn't do it. Or do you really
Yeah.
not have that much, not
Yeah.
have that self control? And we need that self control as Christians. So realizing that, it's
Yeah.
like I have no one to blame but myself. And really hating the sin, as I started to just really despise like it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've literally done this like for so many times. I keep falling into it. I keep telling God I'm sorry, but I keep doing it. And so, but eventually,
Yeah.
just don't give up. I mean, just take it one day at a
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I think it is, again, on things like that. I think it's important to remember too. Every time you resist the sin, it is an eternal victory,
Yeah.
because even if you fail again, I mean, it's important to remember, like, when your soul has a true choice between good and evil, every time you choose good, it'll be a little easier to choose good later on as well. And every
Mhm.
time you choose evil, it it's a little harder to choose good. It's a little easier to choose evil. So, don't be discouraged as well, people who
Mhm.
fall.
Yeah.
You people who fall, we don't no one falls here. Kyle and I, we don't do the sin stuff anymore. Obviously nonsense,
Yeah.
but like, there's a way in which, like, for any of these vices, the more your soul gets used to saying yes to God, the
Yeah.
more you get used. I mean, you can say
Yeah.
neuroplasticity. All right,
Mm.
let's throw some bones to our atheist viewers right now. It's all neuroplasticity, guys. Um, so the more you make these decisions, and again, even if you fall, the fact that you didn't fall last time, that's going to make it easier in the future. And so, like, never get disheartened. The
Mm-hmm.
demons, they are going to speak in your ear. They're going to tell you, oh, it's no big deal if you do this sin. And
Mm-hmm.
then once you do it, they say, oh, this is the worst thing ever. Oh, you're totally lost.
Yeah.
So that is nonsense. And but that's how it works. And obviously, it's not coherent. But those are just the temptations that they give us, the kind of psyop. It's weird to say that demons psyop us, but there's a
It is,
way that
yeah.
that's true. So
Mhm.
yeah, just be accountable, be around people, do all this kind of stuff, and this goes for like every sin. Like obviously, this goes for one we were talking about earlier today, gossip. That
Mhm.
that is like and gossip sounds like a female sin. Oh, the girls gossip, blah blah blah. Men gossip all the time,
Yes.
and it's a sin that can cause eternal damage. It
Mhm.
really is. It is like the purest distillation of pride. Like
Yeah.
kind of gossip. But there's sins all over. I don't want to take more time from other questions, so we can keep going
Yeah.
unless
No,
you're
I
saying something.
completely agree. And learning the power of just silence, of like just being more
Yeah,
mindful about what you're saying and not always needing to say something and being more reflective and thoughtful.
yeah,
And remember, like the words that you do say should be very meaningful. And, you should
yeah,
keep in mind that, God is always watching and that, we should keep that in mind, or even just imagine your priest in the room. Like,
yeah,
would you say that? Would you
yeah,
gossip? But
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So the next question, kind of moving into this like free will consciousness discussion, is in the previous discussion we talked about. You talked about consciousness. You said that you read a specific blog on consciousness that really helped you, like, kind of see that consciousness is more than just something material.
I think that commenter might have misunderstood. I think I said I wrote a
Oh,
blog post
okay.
on consciousness
Yeah.
on this. So uh, the argument of that, and I will actually say, actually, let's go ahead and spoil my big reveal.
Okay.
So that we talked about before.
Mhm.
So I am going to be making some YouTube videos. In fact, I've already made them. In fact, I've already made like 20 of them. They're just not released on YouTube.
Yeah.
So after the Lenten season, I am going to start releasing videos. I don't know, 3 a week, on just different topics. Most of them are just me in the woods talking about whatever. And this is actually one of the things I talk about, like the importance of consciousness. But no, the
Mhm.
the blog post I was talking about is some of my own reflections, and specifically, maybe I was talking about the Chinese room or something in that blog post, but the idea being is like if you imagine the physical universe, right? The physical universe is kind of like a giant mathematical function, or it's
Mhm.
kind of like a giant uh, it's a giant syntactic operation, right? So you
Mhm.
have raw material of matter, you have forces that act on the matter, and of course the forces, kind of in the way of a mathematical function. They can take an input and give you an output and all this kind of stuff. My argument is that consciousness, it's one thing to say that material interactions can account for a lot of the behavior of the human brain. That's one thing that you could actually say. Oh, maybe you have atoms; they're just so complex, right? They're producing the complexity of the human brain. That actually is something plausible. But my point is that consciousness is not just it. Obviously, it's not just behavior. It is consciousness.
Mhm.
It's a totally different ontology. It is
Yeah.
not something. It's not we're describing a syntactic operation. Like basically, my point is in the same way when you have a mathematical function, that mathematical function has kind of like a range, right? Where you put in math and it's only going to put out math. It's not going to output some other character. It's not going to put out an emoji or something like that, or it's not going to
Mhm.
output a smell or something like that. You know what I mean? It
Mhm.
it has a certain range. In the same way, the material universe. If you imagine a materialistic universe as a kind of giant calculator that can do complex operations on
Mhm.
matter, it can do that, but it's only producing matter.
Yeah.
Consciousness is very clearly kind of another dimension that interacts with our world. And this, I think, if you think about it, kind of I don't know if you think about it clearly, this is almost like a tautology. I'm not saying that this is absolute direct in itself proof of God or whatever. That's not actually what I'm saying. But what I am saying is the materialistic view of the universe, that consciousness is and therefore consciousness has to be some kind of mere emergent property of the brain. It has to be something that just kind of happens accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a coherent thing. You could even say maybe some physical interaction of the brain interacts with consciousness, but I think I pray that this actually makes sense what I'm saying. Again, I've actually recorded videos talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's worthwhile to like actually set in a syllogism and like I don't know write it up. But
Mm-hmm.
other people have made kind of arguments
Yeah.
like this, and I think really if you look at the history of like Western philosophy, or let's even say like Roman Catholic philosophy, one of the things that separates Roman Catholic, or let's say scholastic philosophy in the West from, traditional Orthodox theology is, as Orthodox people will tell you, a lack of nous, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nous is consciousness, okay? In a way, it's
Mm-hmm.
not exactly the same. It's not
Mm-hmm.
exactly the same. It's important to be clear. But the word nous in Greek, originally that word has a very narrowly perceptive, you would say that person is in my nous, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
can see him, he's in my perception. Um, and one thing that happened in the West is this gradual, this focus. It's almost like a you ignore the conscious aspect of the universe. You look at, material interactions. You look at rational philosophy and all this kind of stuff. And consciousness was kind of defined out of existence in Western philosophy. So,
Yeah.
the scholastics, they have sensus. But it gradually assumes kind of a different meaning in scholastic philosophy. So, there are a lot of things that are, this is weirdly analogous. I know I'm just going all over the place at this point. This is actually kind of analogous to the so-called essence energy distinction,
Mm-hmm.
or the idea in Aristotelianism. I mean, it makes sense in Aristotelianism because Aristotelianism is kind of like pantheistic, panentheistic, but the idea that God in Roman Catholicism is just pure act, and there's
Mm-hmm.
no,
Yeah.
there's no like divine energies, the essence energy distinction in God.
Mm-hmm.
Catholics believe in an essence energy distinction and everything else, but because Aristotle and actually the Muslims deny that, they take a lot from that
Yeah.
viewpoint. Catholics, I think, they lost. There's less of this emphasis on nous, and of course, obviously, like nous is all over the Bible. It's important for people to realize, like
Mm-hmm.
even basic terms. Let's say, as you probably know, like the word for repentance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we understand that in the West almost as kind of a almost like a punitive, like kind of regret. That's kind of how repentance is. But the word in Greek is actually based on the word for nous. It's a renewing of consciousness. It's a renewing, a changing of our perception, like kind of the
Mm-hmm.
healing of like who we actually are, not just, that I think is something that as time goes on in the West, you kind of there it's discombobulated. What happens in the modern world is one of two things. So
Mm-hmm.
people in the West, obviously, if you go to when I was at the University of Arizona, um, there are a lot of people, in the graduate program. They had a consciousness institute, and all the people in the consciousness institute are basically pseudoscientists. Like they're Hindu mystics and all this kind of
uh,
stuff. Because the reality is,
hmm.
like rationalistic science has almost like excluded that as a possibility. And there's also a perspective. I mean, the perspective of like scientific behaviorism in the modern world, right? Where a person who endorses this philosophy is like Daniel Dennett. So like
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Dennett more or less wrote a book called Consciousness Explained, which is really about how consciousness doesn't exist. Okay, that's really his argument.
Mm-hmm.
And what it amounts to is if you really take seriously empiricism, like objective, establishing objective scientific fact, you'll realize very quickly that consciousness, even though it's all of what we observe,
Mm-hmm.
it is not objective scientific fact. It can never be.
Mm-hmm.
It by its very nature, if we really take scientific empiricism to its logical conclusion, or at least objective scientific empiricism, you can't believe in consciousness, which consciousness is the only thing we kind of perceive. It's the vehicle through which we perceive everything. So some modern philosophers, Dennett is a recent example, but the behaviorist philosophers in the West who are in ultimately this strand of thinking, they go to kind of the wild philosophical angle that like consciousness is somehow an illusion, which
Hmm.
if it's an illusion, how's it an illusion? Like you can't have illusions if you don't have consciousness. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
um so uh, anyway,
That.
some of the videos I'm going to be putting out
Hmm.
are on these kind of things. But the reality is, I just want people to remember when it comes to undoing atheism, let's say, undoing like materialism, like everyone in our society, including people who grow up in religious backgrounds, all of us assume atheism. All right. And I really mean that. Like
Hmm.
when someone writes a history book, if you and I were to write a history book, implicitly, we would be speaking to a hypothetical atheist audience. We'd have to deliberately be like if we're writing the history of the church, it's almost like we assume a materialistic universe. We can't talk
Yeah.
about the miracles. We'll put those in footnotes or something like that, right?
Hmm.
But it's not the same thing. And it's important if you're trying to undo atheism to remember that there are all these the ways that we have of thinking that ignore something like consciousness, which is it's very clearly a non-materialistic thing in the universe. We all have biases to exclude those kind of things from our analysis. And I think unless you are truly, I mean, people say if you don't have faith, pray for faith. And that's not just because, oh, then like I'll become irrational and I'll believe things that I don't have evidence for. No, it actually is because you are in an epistemological bubble as an
Hmm.
atheist.
Hmm.
And in order to get out of that, you kind of have to suspend your disbelief. And
Hmm.
once you do that, you realize, oh, I could say religious people are in a bubble, but I was definitely in a bubble.
Hmm.
All of us kind of were. And once you take that leap of faith, it's actually very easy to see like how kind of funny you were, like how kind of silly you were originally,
Yeah.
So that's what I would say to people. Like, I don't know where the guy who's asking this question, I don't know if he's an atheist or whatever. I'm not exactly sure.
Hmm.
But for those in that situation, like, no one is going to be able to tie you down and force feed you some specific set of information that is going to change your mind about something so fundamental, because the way you look at things is defined by this implicit bias that all of us have in the modern world. Whereas if you existed 1,000 years ago, there'd be no I mean, atheism would have been philosophically untenable. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
no one. That's crazy because you're not built like we are really built almost. It's kind of demonic. We are built to reach the conclusions of atheism. We are
Hmm.
given assumptions that lead us to that conclusion. Kind of if you grow up in the modern world. Um, so
Hmm.
that's what I would say. Just suspend your disbelief, look at things from a new perspective, and just pray and
Hmm.
do the things you need to do. I mean, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Is that's we're like playing in this enlightenment paradigm, but that's the problem. And that actual paradigm, it leads you to a dead end. It leads you
Yeah,
epistemologically. You
yeah.
can't
It leads
justify
it,
you can't
yeah, it
justify
leads you to
things.
Humean skepticism.
Yeah.
That's where you are. And like
But
Hume,
mhm.
at least is philosophically consistent and basically
Yes.
says, I can't believe in anything. I can't
Hmm.
even believe like it's just not, and that is philosophically perfectly consistent. He can do that. He can say that.
Yeah.
But that's where you are.
Hmm.
And I will say I do object to a lot of the way philosophers kind of even sometimes Christians who look at things. I don't think even the goal of philosophy is to objectively, what's the term they use? To establish verifiable, what is it? I forget the terminology,
Hmm.
whatever. I am so unplugged from the university system now. It's actually great. Oh my
Hmm.
God. It's been like, it's close to 10 years since I was doing my PhD. It
Hmm.
really is so relieving. I've totally forgotten basic terminology, but the fact is the world is not about like establishing like 100% solid deductive facts about the universe.
Hmm.
Everything you do is based on a little bit of faith.
Yes.
If you don't like the word faith, you could even use the word statistics in a way if that makes
Hmm.
you feel better. But
Hmm.
like nothing we really know, I mean, maybe I'm agreeing with Hume in a way, but nothing we really know is 100% sure, right? So we have to judge based on plausibility, based on coherent views. Like what is a, you know, I mean, just as an example, so let's say you take like a modern scientist,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Neil deGrasse Tyson probably believes in aliens, right?
Yeah.
Not because he has any evidence of it, but because his worldview is such that, oh, just this statistically,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many planets, there's probably life on one of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think really that obviously is not a deductively justifiable belief. I'm not saying I believe in aliens. I'm not saying I believe in space actually, but that I think there's a tendency. It's not really about establishing 100% belief. It's about what is plausible as truth. Like what worldview is kind of the one that is most coherent.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and
uh,
I noticed that a lot of these modern atheists, it's like that Hume's skepticism is where atheism and skepticism leads. You can't just like you really cannot justify anything, but
yeah,
atheists want to say they're skeptical, but then they don't actually like they just want to
yeah,
use it towards religion. It's not like I can make all these
sure,
moral claims like oh like abortion is a human right and LGBTQ rights and
yeah,
and everything and
yeah,
democracy. These are all great and
yeah,
Christianity is evil and the God of the Old Testament is evil. It's like wait, I thought you were a skeptic.
yeah,
Where like you're just
yeah,
making up fairy tales.
yeah.
It's like why would it on their worldview? Why would it matter if Christianity is made up and people want to follow it? It's just as equal as their made up fairy tale.
Right.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
um,
One of the funniest. I feel like we're going too long on this, but I was just remembered about this. One of the funniest things I ever read. It was in the Emory student newspaper at Emory University a million years ago.
mhm,
Whoever wrote this hopefully is embarrassed. It was probably like 20 years ago.
mhm,
But this guy was making this, and this is a perfect example of what we're talking about, because he was. I think this is while gay marriage was being legalized just
mhm,
all of a sudden in America,
mhm.
and he was writing this thing in defense of homosexuality or something like that. And he said, well, scientists tell us that all the universe is just a bunch of atoms.
Mm.
So how can one configuration of atoms be moral and this one not? So how
Oh
can you
my
say that
god.
homosexuality is wrong and blah blah? And of course, obviously, that doesn't just earn a belly laugh, but it's like, okay, well, what's the difference between? I mean, what's the difference between a hate crime
Yeah.
against the homosexual, and like, is there no moral difference
Yeah.
between
It's
so these people are blind. They're so blind to I guess like I mean, like you said, they might not believe in more. They might say, I don't believe in morality, but
mhm.
oh, I believe in human rights,
Yeah.
whatever those are. I don't. How can you test a human right? Could
Yeah.
I could I could I have a list of these? Can we empirically verify them?
Yeah.
Uh, but
Yeah. That's what I always ask. Well, I think you mentioned something that leads me into my next topic is you talked
right.
about this kind of route of the West and scholasticism. And that kind of leads us, I think, inevitably to the Western atheism. And this kind of goes into the question someone asked, I would love to hear why you chose Eastern Orthodoxy over Catholicism. Obviously, there's the papal claims and theology. You being someone who studied Latin and was interested in Catholicism, why did you decide on Orthodoxy?
Well, I think that's a good question because I think really probably a lot of the people who might ask this, my guess is that there are many people who are kind of between Roman Catholicism and Orthodoxy,
Hmm.
and I'm going to go out on a limb and say, like, in terms of history, in terms of faith, in terms of pretty much every issue, I think most of those people gravitate naturally to Orthodoxy. They'd probably say, if you really had to pin them down, what is the historically like most loyal
Yeah.
choice of these two?
Hmm.
I think Roman Catholicism is just it. I mean, for me, again, I knew Latin. I feel like I'm Western or something like that, but ultimately, it's not. I think a lot of people almost like straw man people who convert to Orthodoxy as if we don't like Western stuff or. I mean, the fact is, I mean, let me just step back and say I don't have anything ill to say about Roman Catholics in general. I think a lot of them, obviously, their faith is it preserves. If we are Orthodox and we believe the Church is true, they are preserving a lot of the Christian faith.
Hmm.
But my perspective is I was in a position where, okay, I'm looking for truth, and I don't want to settle for even 99% truth if I can have 100%.
Yeah.
And I think in the Roman Catholic Church, again, I did read a lot of Aquinas, and I read a lot of I liked Roger Bacon's works randomly. I liked a lot of that stuff. I just gravitated to it. It was fun. It almost felt like, untapped knowledge after all of these years. And, reading the stuff in Latin is really fun. But I think the fact of the matter is, just historically, the Roman Church, it erred.
Hmm.
The papacy is not. I mean, well, there are two sides. They might be historically wrong, but at the same time, today, I think there are kind of moral issues. Like if you raise your children up in the Roman Catholic Church, you are not giving them as solid of a foundation as they would have in the Orthodox Church, even if there were no difference sacramentally between the two. I think that's important. But obviously, the historical claim and this moral claim, I think they're the same thing. I mean, Christ is going to preserve his church,
Yeah.
no matter what. Now, what I would say specifically to, let's say, the claims of the Roman Catholic, let's say the papacy. Okay, is the papacy a real thing? No, it's not. And I would say, like,
Mhm.
you really read. Let me give you an example. So on my book republishing site, one of the books that I republish is Isidore of Seville's uh, 20 books of etymologies. Okay, and it's written in Latin. An impeccably Western saint. Now he's a saint in the Orthodox Church. He was writing what in the 600s or something like that. He's a saint in the Roman Catholic Church as well. He's in the West. He's in Spain. He is, obviously he's under the Patriarch of Rome. He's very Western. In fact, he's even a filioquist. He even, like many people of that period, he just assumed in the West we use the filioque. I guess it's always been in the creed, right? Lots of people thought that at that period. Nonetheless, here's just a good example. His books were used as textbooks throughout all of Western Europe for hundreds of years. They were like because the 20 books of etymologies, they go over mathematics, they go over astronomy, they go over everything about Christianity and other religions as well. They go through God, the angels, the
Mhm.
offices, the liturgical offices of the church, and also the positions in the church. He
Mhm.
goes in excruciating detail. He'll tell you what a psalmist, an elector, a reader, a door holder, what all these people do in the
Wow.
church,
Yeah.
what a presbyter is. And then he gets to bishops, and he says bishops, they're in four different parts. There are normal bishops, there are archbishops, there are metropolitans, there are patriarchs. He explains all of them. He explains the ecumenical council. And in the whole, but would you guess it? He forgot to mention the Pope. He forgot to mention that the most important office of the church that Christ built his entire church on, he just totally forgot to mention it. And this is the text. I can't believe it. What an oversight. It's an oversight that is the textbook that everyone in the West in Latin under the Patriarch of Rome was using for hundreds of years.
Mhm.
And there's no talk of a pope. He talks about the patriarchs. He says the Patriarch of Rome, of Antioch, of Alexandria. Of
Mhm.
course, there clearly is a bishop of Rome, and obviously he was first in the diptychs, according to many sources as well.
Mhm.
But the reality is the Vatican I idea of
Yeah.
like a universal papal jurisdiction is absolutely non-existent. And I think it's important for people to realize like there's not even a word for pope. Like you can't even look it up. Like, I mean, the word papa in like Latin or in Greek, the Greek equivalent, like it was used as a general term for any like a father. That's what it
Mhm.
means,
Yeah.
for a priest. And if you would ask someone of that period, who is the Pope, who is the Papa, he would say, oh, that's the Bishop of Alexandria. Because the term, that word that
Mhm.
much later is used for the Bishop of Rome, was specifically often the Bishop of Alexandria was conventionally referred to as, the Papa, right? And I guess what I'm kind of making a plausibility judgment in here as well. But the fact is, if you are a Vatican I Catholic, you have to believe that for the entire duration of the church, the most important office of the church on which the entire thing was based, there
Mhm.
wasn't a word for it, there wasn't a concept for it. No one like your quote mining of like the existence of it has to be like you just take something out of this massive swath of data that like if you look at it in a different context it has a meaning.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to get at is if you look at these original documents in their original context, there's no such thing remotely close to the papacy. And in fact, even, I mean, to make it even worse, think about something like the donation of Constantine,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, as
Yeah.
people know, it's, everyone admits, including Roman Catholics, it's a fraudulent document that people in the West invented to elevate the status of the papacy. Where in this story, Emperor Constantine goes to the Pope of Rome and says a couple of things. He says, I am giving you jurisdiction, temporal jurisdiction of the whole Western Roman Empire. And I'm also setting you ahead of the bishop. You are the head of the whole church, ahead of Antioch and Jerusalem and Alexandria and Constantinople, right? So that's not even that. Now that's a forgery. We all know that
Mm-hmm.
that's fake. But even that is not consistent with Vatican I Catholicism, because Vatican I Catholicism has this idea that the Pope of Rome, he was number one since day one.
Yeah.
You know, Peter
Mm-hmm.
always had this authority, but even the fake documents they made up in history did not have that assumption. They had
Yeah.
the assumption that the authority of the Pope of Rome came from I guess they were Caesaro papists. They came from,
Yeah.
the Emperor
Mm-hmm.
Constantine.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to like belabor. You know, obviously none of this is me trying to offend Roman Catholics, because I have lots of Roman Catholic friends who are very pious. They really are seeking Christ, and I have normie friends who are Roman Catholic, and so I don't want to like shake anyone up. But the reality is, I think this fundamentally what separates the Roman Catholic Church from Orthodoxy is lies and distortion on their part. And that doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that everyone's responsible for them. It doesn't mean, that there aren't many people who are genuinely seeking Christ. But I think, God's grace over the centuries, I think, has just lessened and lessened
Mm-hmm.
in, the
Yeah.
Roman Church. And, very quickly, I think if you really, a lot of you might be familiar with Father Seraphim Rose,
Mm-hmm.
his Orthodox Survival Guide.
Mm-hmm.
Have you read that or seen that?
No, I have it, but I haven't read it yet.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
just I would. There's an audio recording as well for those of you who are lazy about reading, but just the first couple chapters are really good about the immediate change in piety after the Great Schism,
Mm-hmm.
where suddenly in the West you have histrionic saints, you have these people having delusions of, like goes through
Yeah.
some of the lives of saints in the West, and just how kind of quickly and radically they changed.
Yeah.
And again, I don't say this because I wanted to. Roman Catholics, and this isn't even to talk about what the Catholic Church is doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, and I don't want to speak ill about Pope Francis, who apparently is very ill right now. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is the modern Catholic Church since Vatican II
Yeah.
has really gone wild.
It has.
And it's not even I am not even speaking about that modern Catholic Church, which really is at war with all of the SSPX and all these guys who want to keep their traditional faith. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
place for them ultimately is just in the Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that. And you don't have to live in that world. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to live in this world of, we're kind of talking apologetics right now, but when I guess figured out that orthodoxy was the truth, suddenly the need for apologetics I'm just not interested for the most part. Like
Mm-hmm.
when people come to our parish and talk about it, that's the first thing. Oh, you're over that. You don't need to worry about that now.
Yeah.
Now you can like kind of seek God without distractions. And
Mm-hmm.
for those of you in the Roman Catholic world who are seeing things go awry in your church, ultimately your church is orthodoxy. That is the place you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many. If you are so emotionally connected to Western Rite parishes, they're there. You can go. And of course, if the people at your parish, if you're SSPX or anywhere else, there are Orthodox bishops who many times receive full congregations. Like there are many
Mm-hmm.
West who have been received from Roman. I don't know about Roman Catholics, but I know near where
Anglican.
I live, yeah, Anglican. There are
Mm.
many Anglicans
Mm-hmm.
that convert en masse, and I think it would be a great thing. Like all these, I see in the Catholic world, Cardinal Vigano, all these kind of guys
Mm-hmm.
who are saying a
Yeah.
lot of true and good things. It's like you guys, you should be on our side. Like
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
saying the same things that we're saying.
Uh,
Like so, there's no need for enmity. Like we should be united in Christ. But the
mm.
reality is, we're not right now.
Yeah.
Like And I don't, obviously, all the things that we could say about, oh, the Romans did this, that
Mm,
is not imputing any sin on someone who grows up in Roman Catholicism. And I have no ill feeling, but just don't be too emotionally connected to what you grew up with. You
yeah.
know, ultimately, it's not about being Eastern or Western or Catholic or Protestant. It's about going where Christ is. And
Hmm.
I'm not Orthodox because I like Byzantine Rite. I'm not Orthodox because, you know, I just I don't know, I like Orthodox chants or something. I'm Orthodox because it's the truth. You know,
Hmm.
that's where the truth led. And I think it'd be cool to have, you know, more of a representation of the cultural side of the West. But, you know, if the Orthodox Church were all in Chinese and that's the only option, then I would be there. You know, wherever it is. You know, and I don't know. I don't want to belabor the point, but if you make the if you say that people shouldn't, they should stick with kind of the flavor they have, you know, why not say that about Muslims? You know, like why
Yeah.
not say that about, obviously this is ridiculous. I
Hmm.
want people to be united to the church, and I want us all to be together. And like the only condition for that is, you know, just Orthodox belief and practice and union and communion with the church. You know,
Hmm.
and it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah. Anyway.
I experienced all of that because I wasn't raised with a religion, and I was really
Yeah.
interested in Christianity, kind of like from a political angle, and then
Hmm.
I was just trying to understand the different. I didn't know about the different denominations, and I just started like going to a
Yeah.
local church because it's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
Christian, but it just felt really off. It was like a Presbyterian church. And then when I found out
Uh,
about Catholicism, I'm like, wow, this is way more historically rooted. There's way more tradition
yeah.
and structure, and you're going to have a much deeper theology. But I had no idea about Orthodoxy at the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Catholicism. I'm glad that most of the things that I learned, like they believe in the real presence in the Eucharist, or they confess
Yeah.
that it is, and like these things, like I didn't learn a bunch of weird stuff. But then as I got deeper
Yeah.
and deeper into it, I'm like, why are all the traditional people going to Eastern Catholic and traditional Latin Mass
Yeah.
parish? What's Vatican
Yeah.
II? And then when I learned about Vatican II, I'm like, well, this is clearly contradicting what happened before, like saying,
Yeah.
Muslims worship the same God, and now Orthodox are not schismatic; they're are the other lung of the church, and they still make saints and they
Yeah.
have the Eucharist. And it's like, wait,
Yeah.
what the heck? And then just seeing the actions of
Yeah.
the popes of the past 60 years, especially
Right.
like John Paul
Yeah.
II, who's like embracing false religions and kissing the Quran. It's like
Right.
this is
Yeah.
very different spirituality from medieval
Yeah.
Catholicism, and then
Yeah. And
it kind of leads you into that either SSPX, like recognize and resist, or sedevacantism. But once you read Vatican I, you're like, the Pope can't be a heretic. There's going to be a perpetual
yeah.
office until till the end. So it's either sedevacantism, which is a mental gymnastic and just it contradicts the entire system, or maybe the Catholic Church isn't the church. And then you start looking at Orthodoxy, and it's like
Yeah.
they haven't messed up their liturgy. They have a very reverent liturgy. They haven't destroyed all their own traditions. Sadly,
Yeah.
the Catholic Church has.
Yeah. I think one of the best proofs as well for, you know, the Spirit of Christ being with the Orthodox Church,
Hmm.
and is who do we canonize as saints? You know,
Yeah.
look at the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church. I mean, you mentioned Pope John Paul II. You
Hmm.
know, he obviously did a lot of questionable ecumenical things.
Hmm.
Yet the Roman Catholic Church, he's a saint under their definition. It's,
Hmm.
in fact, the Roman Catholic Church has a tendency in the modern world to take its most liberal members and make them saints. These are
Yeah.
saints, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Orthodox Church, you could say in the Orthodox Church, oh, look at this bishop, he said
Hmm.
something questionable. But who gets canonized as a saint? Who does the
Hmm.
church as one mind view as a saint? And
Hmm.
it is universally the people who keep to the faith strongest. You
Yes.
know, and we have such a plethora of modern saints that
Hmm.
you know, speak to today, and like we never have to be embarrassed. I mean, I feel so bad for Catholics because
Hmm.
everything the Pope or these recent popes have said, you have to be embarrassed of that. You have to feel like, oh, I don't want to hear this, you know. Whereas
Yeah.
you read a
Yeah.
modern Orthodox saint and it's like, this, whoa, this stuff is, it's so good. In fact, it's so bright. Sometimes I can't handle it, you know, like,
Yeah.
and that I think is the best evidence because I think the
Hmm.
Orthodox Church, you know, we have political issues sometimes, we have lots of ups and downs, but the truth is, Church of Christ is still producing great fruit.
Yes.
And I can't necessarily, again, I'm not going to say that Roman Catholics, it's all bad fruit, but look at who they're canonizing. Look at,
Mhm.
if you look at that and compare it to what's happening in the Orthodox world, I think that is a very strong testament.
Yeah. Just to name a few, like Saint Paisios, reading his writings, it's against the spirit of the age, the spirit of like not like ecumenism, but also like this
Yes.
false syncretism with other religions. Is
Yes.
the religion of the
Absolutely.
Antichrist. And Saint John Maximovich, his life is amazing, and all the miracles associated with him. I recommend reading about Saint John. And Father Seraphim Rose will probably be
Yeah.
canonized a saint, and also Elder Ephraim. He
Oh, yes.
started
Yeah.
multiple, like I think, like 17 monasteries
Nice.
in America. Like just, I mean, it's truly terrific. And reading their writings, like it's really it's like reading the early Christians. Is that spirit still lives in
Yeah.
Orthodoxy, and that's who they're canonizing as saints. So
Yeah.
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 So my next question is: someone said, "I would love for Luke Smith to become a writer and write a few books." Would you ever write a book? Have you ever thought about that? I know you have your own press, the Lindy
Yeah.
Press.
So I have always wanted to write a book. I'm a terrible writer. I can put together blog posts, but I think you people watching this conversation who have never seen me before might see that my mind is going all over the place. I sometimes forget strands of it. It actually is quite, I have multi-dimensional thought. It's sometimes very hard to sit and write out. But there is kind of accidentally a book that I'm working on. And it almost like started as lecture notes. Okay. A year maybe two ago, I got really interested in, and this is very, I guess my central question was, how did things get so bad in the English speaking world, religiously speaking? Why is it that where does denominationalism really come from? So I became really interested, I guess, in kind of the history of, let's say, how the Reformation happened, specifically in the English speaking world. Not The Reformation actually. I mean, let's look at one thing that people say about Protestants all the time. Oh, Protestants, they have 40,000 different denominations. They have sola scriptura and they just diversify all over the place. Well, the fact of the matter is that's actually less the case in like Lutheran countries. Like you don't really see this as much in Germany. You don't see it like you go to Norway or Sweden, they just have the Lutheran church there. It really is only in the English speaking world you have this radical variance. So what I actually ended up starting to write is kind of a Orthodox history of the English Reformation. And that I don't know how many pages I have now, but I honestly just kind of pick it up, work on it. I've been reading a lot of books, a lot of history books, and a lot of other little things. But ultimately, my contention is like there's kind of a lack of the fact is, if you're Orthodox, it's almost like you have to be an alternate history guy. You have to read everything from a different angle because the truth is, especially on the Reformation, in English, nearly everything is pro-Protestant, obviously. But the stuff that's pro-Catholic is like not even 100% pro-Catholic, and they almost like miss the important points from my perspective. So I started writing a history kind of this period, and that actually I think it might eventually turn into a book, but I'm writing it as if it's lecture notes. I'm writing it as if I'm presenting it casually to a bunch of guys because it's like if I really I don't want to make it too dense, let's just say that. And really my focus is not, I actually do not care about history at all. Like well, I don't want to say at all, but as the discipline itself I don't care about. But what I do care about is like how all of these events in English history had massive moral implications. They had massive implications for the faith, like just in and out. I mean, just to give you an example. So, what really caused England to be a Protestant country. It's not King Henry VIII himself. It's not his little marital issues. They could have been solved in another way. What really caused the Protestantization of England is the fact that at the time, so let's look at Catholic England. By different estimates, somewhere between an eighth to a sixth of the land in all of England and maybe Scotland as well was monastic land. It was owned by the church, right? And church land is kind of public property. People would often graze on it. They would, there weren't hotels back then. If you're traveling, you would go to a monastery and you might stay there. You might give a little, donation, but they provided a very important public service. And of course, the religious aspect. Imagine living in a country where a sixth of the land is monastic land. Okay, now King
Yeah.
Henry VIII, as people will say, King Henry or at least Anglicans will kind of cope. They'll say King Henry VIII, he didn't want to. He was a loyal Catholic. He didn't want to, because and it is true, he wrote actually defenses of Catholicism, things that we would agree with, for the most part,
Hmm.
against Protestants before actually his schism from Rome. But
Wow.
what happened after his schism from Rome is something. He did something very egregious that affected the world much, I don't know, much more crucially than people might think. And that is, he decided to confiscate all monasteries and destroy every single one of them on the entire British Isles, right?
Hmm.
Or at least all that he could. And it's
Yeah.
important to remember, like, the Soviets didn't do this, the Turks didn't do this, but King Henry VIII actually went through. First, they started with the small monasteries. They would take every single monk, they would seize the property, and what he ultimately did is he sold the property to lesser aristocracy. And so what happens is now a sixth of the land in the country is sold off to basically the highest bidder. Now the king has all these allies who are not just his political allies. They've actually gotten this. Henry VIII didn't actually sell them at good prices for himself. He made a little money, but for
Hmm.
the most part, these people are making killings. They're becoming rich off of this monastic land. So when the question of reestablishing communion with Rome comes, what does this aristocratic new aristocracy in England want to do? Do they want Catholicism in England? No, they are now militant Protestants because they have a
Wow.
massive financial interest to do this. And if you go point by point, actually in English history, it's interesting how much, almost like, and again, this is a point where, as I was saying, there's kind of commonalities, obviously. And if you look really at the Protestant Reformation, we nearly always are going to be on the Catholic side because they are fighting. There are so many things I don't think people even realize, like the desecration, the demonic stuff that many in all over these Protestant countries, the kind of mass destruction of churches.
Hmm.
Like we look at, you go to a church in England now, and of course there's not going to be iconography or statues because there was a period in time where all of this was destroyed. In fact, the Puritans would even like keep a gauge of what things they destroyed in each church.
Oh
And all of
my.
these had iconography and all this kind of stuff. And they recorded this stuff with relish. But either way, what I was going to say is, obviously Henry VIII creates this totally re-engineered English society. Again, monasteries provided a public good. They were
Hmm.
kind of public land. People used them as hotels. And obviously, they were praying for the entire country.
Yeah.
And now, the essence of the faith, like, it's important to remember, like, we might not go to monasteries every week or something like that, but they are extremely important because they are, any church is supposed to be a mirror of the liturgy in heaven. But a
Hmm.
monastery is a lot closer because they do the daily prayer hours. They do, all the liturgies they can. They are the model for our lay parishes. And even, we as individuals, ideally, uh, would that we could, pray all the hours every day.
Yeah.
So either way, what happens here is, again, King Henry VIII, in terms of belief, he might say, "Oh yeah, I believe in the Eucharist and all this kind of stuff." But what he ended up doing, he really set the ball rolling for a radical Reformation in England that created an entrenched Protestant aristocracy immediately. And
Gosh.
again, the core of the faith, the monastic core, there no longer could people go to the major monasteries. A lot of them, and a lot of them were shut down bloodily. There were many, like, monks who were killed by King Henry VIII when they refused to give up their monasteries. But I mean, obviously, to this day, we still read the Canterbury Tales about people making pilgrimage to, to Canterbury,
Hmm.
which, goes back to, Saint Augustine of Canterbury, right?
Hmm.
Or, there are legends that it's even older. But either way, this is such, it's hard to imagine like what this means, but there's so much of our history as, English or British people, widely that has just been totally taken out of our faith. And
Mm-hmm.
either way, again, my goal was to kind of understand like how this has actually affected our society, going point by point. I go through the English Civil War, which really was a war between Anglicans and Presbyterians, like Calvinists. The bad guys won,
Mm-hmm.
and they killed the king and made either way. That's one of the books I'm working on now.
Oh.
That might not be what I don't think many people were like. I really want Luke Smith to write a book about the English Reformation. I'm going to guess my subscribers are not actually thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from that, I think the issue is I'm open to writing other books.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like I am very much all over the place. I really, what I'd really like, I'd really like to just have a little institute and have little lecture courses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That would be easier.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can order my thoughts in a way, I might just publish books that are a collection of my own essays or something like that. That might be the best I can. But this little project of mine on the English Reformation is kind of the most coherent thing I have so far. So it might be that might just be notes for myself that I circulate around friends, or I put out the talking points. It
Yeah.
might be like an actual book, in a little bit. So
Yeah.
we'll see where that is. So
That sounds awesome.
that's an answer to the question that is very maybe an unexpected answer, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I think there is a need for that. Is you're right, is that when people are reading in English, it's gonna be from
yeah,
a Catholic or mainly Protestant perspective.
yeah,
And so having English Orthodox writings on these issues, it's like, yeah, there is a different way to tell history. It's like everyone,
yeah,
has their bias. So yeah,
yeah,
not
and a lot of
expected,
things
but
will
yeah.
yeah, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things will become clear. Suddenly, it's like you look at things in the Orthodox perspective, and they all make sense all of a sudden. It's funny. So yeah, I work a little bit on that every day. I might write a couple sentences and string together a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, it, I've been busy recently. So yeah, that's the actual book that I'm doing right
Yeah.
now. So,
Awesome. I guess kind of leading into the next question. Someone said, "Luke, please bring back the Not Related podcast." So, is this going to be the next thing? Maybe this more kind of lectures on different issues. I mean, kind of like your YouTube channel
yeah.
already. But would you continue making episodes on Not Related?
Um, the thing with the podcast is like I don't want to adulterate the podcast with bad episodes. Like I'm never
Mm-hmm.
going to force. It's almost like I could just leave it there, and it just feels almost perfect. Not entirely perfect. There
Yeah.
are a couple things I might change, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I think all the stuff I do to get the ideas out there. And
Yeah.
sometimes the medium is better to have it in a podcast. Sometimes a video is better. Sometimes a blog is better.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just kind of how I work. Maybe a book is better for some things. So I think with the podcast as well, like I'm not going to have like a big long series. I'm not going to do Not Related season 3 on the English Reformation. We're not going to do that. But because usually I do individual episodes, and I always try to
Mm-hmm.
do them on things that like aren't a dime a dozen. You can't just like
Yeah.
look it up and like, um, every once in a while an idea will come to my head. I thought about doing an episode on the glass bead game, and
Mm-hmm.
I actually thought about doing an episode on Ray Pete stuff, but I don't know. I, I can't guarantee I'm going to have
Yeah.
more episodes of that.
Okay.
Well, I don't. It's not closed off, but
Mm-hmm.
you never know.
Yeah. Yeah. I recommend that if people aren't familiar with it, go on his website and listen to, watch, and read the episodes. They're really good.
Yeah,
Actually, one of the comments was, I think this was a not related episode, is someone, they were Greek, or they are Greek, and they said they started watching you because of
yeah,
Linux and text related topics, and they were pretty nasty type of atheists. But you made a video on the logos in Christianity,
yeah.
and that kind of got him on a path to reconsider God. And that was actually one of the first videos I saw from you, and I really
Mm,
enjoyed that video. Um,
yeah,
just that research, I would love to see more, yeah,
yeah,
content
yeah,
on the logos.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. That was an interesting episode because like I barely waded into the topic. Like the
Hmm.
reality is there is so much in kind of obviously the Orthodox Church, like the kind of hardcore philosophy of the church.
Hmm.
And it's also interesting to see how it even influenced. It really Christianized um, pagans in a way. Like, you
Hmm.
know, paganism became a lot more monotheistic. It became a lot. You know, people started talking about the monad, and they started talking about trinities, and you know, the logos and all this kind of stuff a lot more often when you know, they contacted, let's say, Christianity.
Hmm.
And I think, you know, the unfortunate fact is religion is put in such a way nowadays where we are psyoped into thinking this is, oh, there's rational stuff, and then there's religion, and this is for, it's for your grandma, it's for your like emotion, these emotional people who do Pentecostal stuff. And no, like, I mean, in truth, there is no difference between religion and the rest of science, you know. It might be a domain where we can't do active experiments or something like that, but
Hmm.
I think once people realize that, you know, religion is something serious, and especially if, you know, many people have said, you know, they grew up Orthodox, and you know, that just they don't take it seriously until they really see this kind of stuff. They only
Yeah.
see the superficial aspects. And let's just remind ourselves, I'm not saying that religion has to be intellectual. In fact, it kind of shouldn't, because really God, you know, God has given us orthodoxy, and it is a religion that is accessible to people of every IQ level. You know,
Yeah. Hmm.
the simplest people are elevated by it, and the most intelligent people are elevated by it. That's kind of the point. It's almost as if it's for our salvation. It's
Yeah.
for our benefit. And it's not, you know, growing up, if you grow up in low church Protestantism, you might have the idea that religion is just it's for simple people. They're emotional, blah blah blah, and that is just not the case in Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
It is for everyone. It is different for like, you know, my priest always describes Orthodoxy as like a buffet,
Hmm.
and you can never ever eat enough of this buffet.
Yeah.
You just have to be able to like pick something that is going to be good for you. You have to be careful. You don't want to waste your time.
Hmm.
You know, you want to get the stuff that's good for you, that's
Hmm.
meant for you. But there's just so much more than an individual could eat up. And the other
Yeah.
fact is like, I would love to do more episodes like that, but I have to do some hardcore reading at this point. Actually, where I am right now, you know, I'm not at home. Like I don't have easy access to my library and, you know, books and
Mm.
stuff like that. But I once I can get my hands on some things, I really want to do more, I guess, study into that kind of stuff. But you know, I don't want to make it a distraction, but there's other stuff I have to do. But you know, yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I know that that episode had a lot of impact on people, and I'm glad because if as well, you know, those podcast episodes, like I always do the stuff on my channel as if it's for everyone,
Hmm.
as if I'm talking, actually use, I kind of assume most people watching my channel are atheists.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
actually not the case. I see. And I
Hmm.
realized when I started doing live streams, everyone wants to talk about like orthodoxy. I don't know what, you know, I barely done a video on it, and that's what people
Yeah.
want to talk about. But,
Yeah.
you know, that's how it is. That's what people are seeking, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely. Well, I think, people are seeking the truth, and orthodoxy is the truth, so it just happens. But what you're saying is, a great thing about orthodoxy is that we have all different types of saints that you can connect with. Is we have philosophers who are saints. We have fools for Christ. We have, warriors, kings. I mean, there's all these different types of saints, and that's what's great is it is for everyone. My next question is actually someone who's a little bit of a hater, but I think it was an interesting question. They said Luke is easily the top zero point 0.01 intellectually. What does he now do with it? Living an impotent life as an Orthodox LARPer in a village. How did he come up with this incredible plan? Did they visit and intimidate him after he posted too much problematic wrong think content? Same story as Roosh V when he wanted to organize offline with other revolutionary minded men. What a waste. In my opinion, this is just as sinful as when the average Joe wastes his life playing video games.
yeah. Well, I don't like being described as revolutionary. I think that's I'm very insulted by that. I think people saying
Mm,
stuff like that. I th- we live in a world of an evil system. Like there really is an evil system in the world,
yeah.
and I think people like that they almost assume that you have to attack the system directly. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you got to be out there. You got to be a political agitator. You got to do this, that, or the other. And I think that's wrong. And I think really the system lures you into doing that. Now, firstly,
Mm-hmm.
I will proudly LARP in a village. That's my goal. I don't want, like the truth, and it's not even LARP. It's just that's normal human life. Like
Yeah.
it's really the norm. Like people who think they're in the system, I'm going to make a difference, I'm going to have a big job, and I'm going to, I've had friends who said, well, I have friends, I had this for a while, where I'm like, oh, I'm going to, once I finish my PhD and I get tenure, then I'll be able to make a dent on the system and blah blah blah. And that's kind of delusional. That's the wrong strategy to have. I'm not saying that you can't have any effect from inside the system, but I think it's best for everyone's salvation is if you are creating something better than that.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in sending my kids to public school and normie society and having them use apps for whatever. I don't want that. Like, I don't want them to have to fight the battles that I fought. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely not retreating from the world. Yes, I haven't done videos in a while, but the reason I haven't is my own business. It's not,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
people will make up. I mean, this comment, I think, is not even like kind of a hate comment or
Mm-hmm.
that negative. I think,
Mm-hmm.
I think he just wants me to be back, and
Yeah.
I'm flattered. But that's not exactly how it is. Like, life
Yeah.
is complex, and I'm trying to do the best I can. And the fact is, a lot of the stuff I have said, I don't want to be on YouTube until I'm 70 doing the same videos over and over again, telling you to, divest from the system, be your own man, blah, blah, blah. At some point, you have to actually do what I'm saying,
Yeah.
like, to make it useful. And
Yeah.
frankly, I have so many hours of me talking on the internet. I think that is enough. Now, as I said, I will be releasing more videos because I have more things to say.
Mm-hmm.
But, and again, I'm not, attacking the system. I think that comment kind of assumes that we should just almost like attack the devil directly on, and
Mm-hmm.
in fact, we are not supposed to fight these celestial battles ourselves. We have to focus on our own salvation, on our own lives. And if we don't do
Yeah.
that, if no one does that, we
Mm.
don't have like a future. Like, we don't, like, once we win, once things go right in a political direction or something like that, we're not going to know what to do if
Mm.
we're so invested in the system, if we don't know, how we're supposed to act, and if we don't know the true alternative. But yeah, so that's my response to that
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
No, I think that's a really good response, is just focusing on an alternative and building something really good. And people are so used to just this endless amount of content, like just, oh,
Yeah,
just, all this stuff, all this information, but it's like you're being more thoughtful about what you're gonna put out there. Like, is there something actually unique and that's worth sharing, or am I
yeah,
just saying the same thing? I mean, you already have so many great videos. If they're looking for the content that you've already made, is you have you made
yeah,
it it's clear what to do.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah. So one of the last questions is, someone says, I have a question. When you mention traditional Orthodox societies where people live life, leisure, work, and daily prayer, what place, country are you referring to? It's a genuine question. Sure, the only Orthodox countries I can recall are the ones I would rather not live compared to where I currently live. Or are they societies from the past?
well, I guess the truest answer is heaven. Uh, I mean, the
Mhm.
reality is, actually, I was talking about the English Reformation, and one
Mhm.
of the things that did happen during this period is all of society is restructured in a way towards commerce, towards, the public lands on the monastery. You can't have your sheep on the monastery lands anymore. Everything is becoming collectivized. It's all for production. It's all for economies of scale. You have the enclosures controversy, where people built fences all over everything.
Mhm.
And really, you have a virus that has infected most of the world. Now, there are many, I mean, you can go actually even to very secular European countries, be that Orthodox or even Catholic countries, and you will have people who will, have a siesta, which really historically was corresponding to prayer hours and stuff like that.
Mhm.
That there is a natural breathing of that daily cycle. But the fact is, I don't think there's no place right now I can think of that I could be like, you can take your children here right now and raise them, and it's going to be perfect.
Mhm.
This world is something that it's not so much that we have to recreate it, but we have to separate ourselves from the virus. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is the issue. The truth is, humans, like, God created us to survive and thrive in a very specific kind of lifestyle. A small village, or a town. You can live in a town. I'm not knocking that, but a place where your society is comprehensible to you, and you live in a life with a lot of leisure. You have a lot more free time than usual. So, am I going to say that Russia or whatever, is the perfect place? No, absolutely not. In fact, nearly every Orthodox country culturally has, even if they haven't been infected by the virus of modern wage slavedom and like this, kind of Western economy,
Mm-hmm.
they have lived under Muslim rule. They live in, many, of course, Christians in the Middle East live in a culture that is not fully their own.
Yeah.
They live in isolated places. They have small segments of that society that are actually very close to how they used to be, where you have a leisurely life, you have close communal environments. But I can't give a full-throated endorsement to any specific place.
Mm-hmm.
So the truth is, like, this is, again, it's not something we have to rebuild, but it's something, when you separate yourselves from a life, this kind of modern rat race, you
Mm-hmm.
will actually find that you have time for everything that you kind of want to do and you're meant to do, like you're
Mm-hmm.
created to do. And the church ultimately, it's important to remember, like, our liturgical calendar, I mean, that our calendar should be the liturgical calendar. Humans need periods of fasting, they need periods of reflection and feasting and all
Mm-hmm.
this kind of stuff. And that ultimately is the standard of how human society should work. And it's there for us. It's given to us by the apostles and developed in the church, and with the saint days and all this kind of stuff. And so that's what I would say. And
Yeah.
the I guess the negative side of that is I can't say that utopia is right there in some Eastern European country or something like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is accessible to us. Like, it is a world that we can make, that God has given us the blueprint for.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in, I also wanted to say this to kind of the last comment. We are in such a blessed time because we have, I mean, the internet can be a terrible thing, but at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
it can be such a wonderful tool for, for making passive income, for separating
Mm-hmm.
yourselves, or like not making yourself beholden to the world in a way. You
Yeah.
can, there are many things that you can do. I have lots of friends who are Orthodox and work from home, and like they have much, the only thing lacking is people being in the same place, right? That's really
Yeah.
what you need. You really need a community where people can raise children together and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
um, so that's my answer to the question. If you're looking to pack your bags, I can't give you a place, but at the same time, like, the news is even better. Like, we can have that. We have the blueprint for it, and it's not a LARP. Like, it's important for people to remember, this isn't a LARP. This
Mm-hmm.
is humans. Like, the modern world gives, like, the 40-hour work week. That is a stressor that we need
Mm-hmm.
to remove. Public education, where children are diagnosed with mental diseases because they don't want to sit for hours in a
Yeah.
desk, like, that is an absurdity. It's an absurdity that we have, BS jobs, as one of my podcast episodes is on. That is the thing, that is if you just took that away, if you, and mind you, this is not something that we have to take a revolution, overthrow the government, blah blah blah. No, this is something you can actually do yourself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is, you can make the decision to not participate. You can make the decision to divest. You can, every choice you get, move more in that direction, and things will open up a lot quicker than you might assume. That's what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. You just have to be working towards it, and it may not be easy, but it's just we're trying to work towards something better
Yeah.
for
And the
ourselves and our
goal is,
family.
yeah, and remember, like, thinking about theology and thinking about, should I be Roman Catholic or Orthodox? These are hard decisions, but make them the right way so your children won't have to make them.
Yeah.
Make the right decisions about how you want your life oriented, where you're going to live. What kind of, you're going to go into debt to get something you don't need? Are you going to cut things down and, live on a little less? Like, make those decisions now. So when your children are in the position to make those decisions, they now have a blueprint and they can follow. It's easier for them to make those decisions, you know?
Yeah,
So
definitely. The last question is, someone says, is it a good idea to invest time into learning to use free open source software like Arch Linux? I wonder if your view has changed in the past 2 years.
I think it's that's a person by person. I'm not going to say everyone should do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I would say this: I never sat down to learn how to use Linux or something like that. I never was like, I'm going to teach myself. I'm going to watch some internet course, blah blah blah. But the thing is, when you have a leisurely life, or where you create a leisurely life, I was working a job and doing all this kind of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
when you know, separate yourselves from all your vices and watching questionable things on the internet and all this kind of stuff, or playing video games all the time, you are going to realize that, oh, I actually have a lot of time to tinker and play around and learn, and I think that might draw you to Linux, and that can be a fantastic way of making money, to learn systems administration and programming. That kind of stuff can give you a lot of skills, even if you are not employed for those kind of things. But
Mm-hmm.
that could also be said about other things, other kind of practical skills. The nice thing about computers, you have to remember, is like, unlike being a workman, you don't have to pay the if you're a carpenter, you have to buy wood.
Yeah.
If you're a computer programmer, you don't have to buy code. You know what I mean? You don't have to buy lines of code.
Yeah.
You can write infinite. You know what I mean?
Um,
So there's kind of a free entry cost. So I think if you are intellectually inclined, if you like that kind of stuff, if you feel a pull in that direction, I would consider it. I wouldn't invest there. My goal, or maybe not my goal. I think my way of looking at life, and this is all I remember. Actually, I had an acquaintance in high school who said this awful thing. Actually, this person is a minor celebrity. I don't know. I'm not
wow.
going to talk. So
Okay.
uh, probably minorer than me.
Mm-hmm.
Someone in politics, actually, but
Oh, okay.
it doesn't matter. No, you've never
Yeah.
heard of this person.
Okay.
Someone might have, but I don't want to say their name
Yeah.
because I don't want to. I
Uh-huh.
don't want to tell them that they know Luke Smith. But either way, this person said something awful
Mm-hmm.
and was like, "I like to have every single day filled up. All my schedule should be filled with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like every single day, I like to be busy. I like to get work done." And that is so awful. It's not just soul crushing.
Yeah.
When you really get things done, or to really get things done, to really if you plan every moment of your life, it's only going to be as good as you plan it.
Yeah.
What happens if you give yourself free time, as I did, back when I was in grad school, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, maybe I'm going to take some time for me and start looking at this Linux stuff. I realized there's a whole world that I could play around with. I could tinker. I could learn a little bit more, and that was such an asset to me. I want to say, like, one of the most important years of my life, I was thinking about this the other day, was actually the year 2018.
Mm-hmm.
This is just an example. In 2018, I had already started my YouTube channel. It was very small, but I was moving away from my PhD program, and I ended up moving to the random town of Statesboro, Georgia. Okay, and I just lived there a year. I had no job there. Well, I eventually got a job as a carpenter there, but for
Mm-hmm.
a while I didn't really have any job. I was living in a place that costed like $200-$300 maybe. That's the only reason I moved there. It's cheap. I could live there without a car. That's all I wanted. I just wanted some time to clear my head. And that was a period I sat down. I didn't fall into vices. I didn't start playing video games all the time or something like that. And I started going to the university library,
Mm-hmm.
started hanging out, started tinkering with things. That is when I started my podcast. I started really doing YouTube videos. I would do like a video a day or something like that on, like, not trivial stuff. They'd be important kind of conceptual things. I did a huge amount of reading. That's when I was like getting back into church as well. I was reading this, some scholastic stuff I mentioned before, but I just, when I gave myself some free time, everything opened up. All the stuff, all this goodness came upon me. I was just kind of, and that's kind of what I suggest to other people. I
Mm-hmm.
think, have free time, but don't waste it. Do not
Yes.
waste it on Netflix, not video game. People say I always knock video games, and I'm not saying 100% they're always demonic. They're just mostly demonic because they're
Yeah.
they're mostly just wasting the. And I look back, think about this. If I had been playing a video game in 2018, you wouldn't know about my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
That guy who said, "Oh, you got me back into church," he would still be cursing God or something like, or maybe I don't want to say it was all because of me,
Yeah.
but
Uh-huh.
based on what he said, like there would be so much. And just think about that. That's just me. That's one period in my
Yeah.
life. Now think about what you can do. Think about what the people listening, like, when you, again, this is what we started off our discussion on. When you really open yourself up to what God created you to be, and the possibilities that he gave you, and that he gives all of us, when you really are kind of open to that and you're honestly seeking it, you're going to see that they're all over the place. There's so much to do. There's so much creation to do. There's such a positive impact that you can have on everything.
Hmm.
And that is the danger of being distracted by the world. And that could mean Netflix. That could mean having a job that's too invasive, even if it makes a
Yeah.
lot of money.
Uh-huh.
So
Hmm.
when you get rid of those things, when you kind of tamper your vices, you kind of ignore, you put yourself in a new position. And again, this isn't to say, oh, this is amazing for me, but I'm just reporting to you. My YouTube channel would not be the same. It would be, it made a lot of different. I made the podcast and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and this is just a little part of my life. I guarantee you, you can do better. Whoever you are watching this, you can do so much more. Just cooperate with God. Again, this was a period where I was finally opening back up to God, because he really rubbed my nose in it for certain things. But
Yeah.
that's how it is, and it's exciting. It really is exciting. And I'm doing great things in my life now, but sometimes I look back to that period like, that was fun. I woke up every day,
Yeah.
read books I'd never heard about,
Uh-huh.
and made a podcast. That was nice.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree, and that was my experience too. Is like, I played so much video games, like elementary school, middle school, high school, and you look up, I got like 1,000 hours in Counter Strike, 2,000 hours in Rust, and it's like, imagine if I had
Oh
been
no. Yeah.
studying, learning a skill, working out, volunteering or getting involved in like my community,
Yeah.
is I'd be an expert.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that in college I'm like, I'm gonna be a minimalist. I got rid of my gaming computer. Not everyone needs. You don't need
Yeah.
to take like extreme steps. Everyone's
Yeah.
different. But I wanted to just focus on doing productive things, and that's when I started. Learning a lot about theology and church history, and then also learning the video editing. Is I learned how to edit videos by just practicing over and over and
Yeah.
over again. And what helped me a lot was just making clips for other YouTubers. It's like, oh, I really like this, so I learned how to download the video and then edit it in DaVinci Resolve. It's really easy if you want to learn video editing, and just practicing and practicing and practicing. And it really helped my YouTube channel grow, and I was able to like spread a good message by making these clips and then helping my
Yeah.
own YouTube channel. But if I had just been playing video games that entire time, same thing. I wouldn't like you
Yeah.
wouldn't have all of this. So it's like
Yeah.
the free time that you have in high school and college, or just those ages, like use it really wisely, because as you get
Yeah.
older, you have less and less free time. As you get married, as you have kids, that free time goes away. So you really need to build that foundation when you're single and have a lot of free time. Is the worst thing you can do is just spend it watching video games and anime and porn. It's gonna destroy your soul, and it's
Yeah.
gonna set you up
Yeah.
for failure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
yeah.
there are monks, of course, who keep skulls of the deceased as a
Mhm.
memento mori. And
Yeah.
for me, I actually have never deleted my old Steam profile,
Mhm.
because every once in a while I go and look. Just let me remind myself how many hours I played on, how many hours I wasted on this,
Yeah.
and it is pathetic.
Hmm.
And that but importantly, we can all look back at the things we missed.
Hmm.
But the truth is, there's always, well, I don't want to say there's always time for repentance. I will tell you, there's time for repentance right now. I don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. I
Yeah.
don't know what's going to happen to you
Uh-huh.
in 30 minutes. But
Hmm.
right now, you can repent of everything, all your
Hmm.
sins, but also you can be like, the thing is, one other kind of thing about the West, where when it comes to repentance and all this kind
Hmm.
of stuff, is it almost makes it seem like, oh, it's punitive, and it's all, oh, I just, it causes despair. People
Hmm.
freak out about the evil they've done. But the
Yeah.
truth is, true repentance, when you have changed, when your noose is changed and you have a new perspective, it's an exciting time. Like
Yeah.
confession of forgiveness is exciting because the new possibilities, the new things that open are just like you can't shut up about them. Like there's just so much to explore, and there just aren't enough time. There's not enough time in the day, but you're still gonna make it worth it. It's still
Hmm.
gonna be great. So,
Yeah.
despair is bad. Like I never, it's important. I say a lot of things that people might think are negative. Don't do this. Don't do that. Blah, 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 blah. That's a bad thing. But like,
Yeah.
I'm only saying that because like, those are anchors keeping you away from the
Yeah.
stuff that matters. That's so much better. Maybe I should make that more clear, but
Yeah.
I'm telling you now, tell everyone else. So, you know,
Yeah.
that's what really matters.
It is. It's so freeing once you understand this. Once you have discipline, discipline is not it's not controlling. It's freeing. I mean, that's what Christ brings us is true freedom. You're not a slave to sin and all these things. You can truly be free, and that's what God
Yeah.
made us for. So, yeah, I think this is a great place to end it. I would love to do a part three sometime if we want to.
Yeah.
If there's any topics that people want us to talk about, comment them below. If you have any more questions for Luke or me, um, I
Yeah.
would love to do that. So happy that we could do this interview, and I
Yeah.
really hope that everyone has a good Lent. Hopefully, we gave some talked about some things that would be edifying and that you can keep in mind for overcoming sins. But thank you, Luke.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's fun. So
Yeah.
yeah, part three, that's a possibility. So
Yeah,
we'll
yeah, we'll
we'll keep
see.
in touch.